So today we're going to have the City of Bozeman present, and then folks representing the Bozeman Water Adequacy Ballot Initiative. And then we're going to have some topic experts from the Regional Housing Coalition, Gallatin County, and the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. So again, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. I'm going to turn this over first to the City of Bozeman, which I understand is Sean Coates, David Fine, and Deputy Mayor Joey Morrison. I saw you all on here today, but if you three wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves, and then I'm going to turn it over for the next 10 to 15 minutes for your presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll start real quick. I'm Sean Coates, the Utilities Director for the city.
And I'm David Fine. I'm the Housing and Urban Renewal Program Manager for the city.
And I'm Joey Morrison. I have the honor of serving as our Deputy Mayor.
Great. Thank you all for being here. And is that share working for you? Because I wasn't sure if you had slides or not you wanted to share today.
Yeah,
I do.
Okay, great.
Let me share that.
And we can see. So thank you. It's coming on.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, David. And good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and really appreciative of the opportunity to talk about this ballot initiative that's coming in front of us. We'll have some general kind of grounding what we're able to talk about here at the city, and then going to pass it off to David and Sean to talk about some housing information that's happening here in the city, as well as then over to Sean to talk about water. And then we'll kind of wrap it up and hopefully hand it off and be able to answer any questions. I don't know if you want to do them by presentation or if you want everybody to go, but we can do it either way.
Thank you, Joey. Yes, our typical practice is, other than a couple quick clarifying questions, just to make sure we understand what you said, we will go through the panel and then have a more robust Q&A.
Sounds excellent. Okay, Sean, you want to take us to the next slide? Just some information about what you're going to hear from us today. So the Ward Initiative is a ballot initiative that came about from a special interest group that created a ballot initiative to gather signatures. It received enough signatures to be put on the ballot in the allotted time, and consequently now it will be on the November 2025 ballot. This is not something that we at the city created. So we are now in a position of saying, hey, we want to make sure that a well-informed electorate is making their decision in November. Basically, the really short answer of what it does, it seeks to change city code to require developers who seek to use cash in lieu of water rights for development to provide affordable housing in order to use that program. Sean, you want to take us to the next slide? So just to reiterate again, we at the city, we cannot take a position on a ballot initiative once it's reached adequacy. So once it's received a number of signatures to be put on the ballot, the city is not we no longer can take a position as an organization. But we wanted to make sure that everybody can have an informed conversation with their friends and families and for themselves when they're making this decision. We thought it'd be really important for folks to have a landscape and an understanding of where we are today in the city of Bozeman. And I think I'm handing it over to David.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Morrison. So like I said earlier, I'm David Fine. I'm the housing manager for the city. And just to set the stage here about where we're at with housing in the city of Bozeman, we're coming off a period of pretty significant growth. Between 2013 and 2023, we had an annual average growth rate of 3.7%. And I think, I arrived here in 2008. We can feel this, right? We can see it as new housing developments pop up on the edge of town, in the middle of town. We can see it in new apartment, and we can see it and feel it in our pocketbooks as we look at housing prices across the community. The city hasn't been completely unable to respond to this challenge since 2022. We have 1,777 affordable units either built, under construction, or in the pipeline. And the pipeline means there's an active development application. I can say with certainty that none of those units were built without some sort of subsidy. So for just 4 of the projects contributing to that, there were over $120 million of subsidy. Most of it coming from the federal low-income housing tax credit program, but also coming in the form of local, private, and state financing. So there has not been any affordability without some sort of outside subsidy. I think we'll be able to show you some numbers that explain that why later. But honestly, thinking about this growth and then thinking about the run-up in housing costs, I think there's a very clear story about Bozeman becoming in demand and having an inadequate supply of housing to meet that demand. And then it takes a while to build housing. The market has responded to meet that demand, and you're seeing some cooling in rents, rent concessions in new projects, and lower rents, across older housing stock. And I think that's a good encapsulation of where we are today.
So I'll switch gears a little bit here and talk about background and what is the city's current water adequacy policy. So this policy went into effect in the early 1980s, and it was for those history buffs, this went into effect as a result of essentially breaching the Mystic Lake Dam. There were basically issues up there from a structural standpoint that could have caused a pretty dramatic damage if the dam failed. So it was breached. And then when it was breached, we essentially lost all of this water storage up in the watershed. And so at that time, it created a water crisis for Bozeman. Said, okay, where do we get our water now? And so the policy that was created out of that basically requires that developers bring water to the table to offset the demand of their development. And they do that in one of 3 ways, or multiple of 3 ways. First of all, and we see this literally in every development project today, is that each development is reducing the demand of their development through water conservation practices. And that's a big part of our water conservation program. And then once developers are reducing the demand associated with their project, then they have 2 options left. They can bring usable water rights to the city to offset the remaining demand of their project, or they can pay the city cash in lieu of water rights, and then the city acquires the water rights using that cash. And just looking back at how many developments have used this tool, 99% of the developments since the 80s have used this tool. And I'll get into why that is. So what does Word's ballot language say? If you want to get an exact copy of the ballot language, you can link to the code there. But basically it says that developers can only use that city's cash in the water rights tool only if their development brings 33% of its housing product as affordable housing, and that's for 3 or more units. Deed restricted for 99 years, and then we'll get into the AMI definitions a little bit later, but basically it's 120% or less of AMI for purchase units and 60% of AMI or less for rented units. And this applies to all residential development. And one thing I want to highlight here is when a development application comes in the door in the city, either as a site plan or a subdivision, that cash in lieu policy or the water adequacy policy basically has to be met before a subdivision can receive a final plat approval or a site plan can receive a final site plan approval. So if you were to say, for example, have a 100-lot subdivision, that would be more than 3 units. They would be caught in this this language. So it's not just multifamily units, it's also single-family home units. The initiative also repeals basically the ability of development to use offsite water conservation measures. So currently in the city code, we allow a developer to do offsite water conservation work and then get a credit for that in their own development. So an example of that might be picking an old 1970s apartment complex, replacing the toilet fixtures, replacing the shower heads, with low water use fixtures, and then getting that credit back for their development. So this ballot initiative would take that tool off the table. So what are some of the alternatives if the initiative is approved by the voters? So again, access to that cash and low water rights tool becomes restricted to development that only provides, that 33% of their housing product as affordable housing. So item 2 here, kind of coming back to what I said earlier, where I talked about, 99% of the developments out there since the 80s have used this cash and the water rights tool. It's very difficult for developers to bring their own water rights to the table. Okay, so it generally takes somewhere in the 5 to 8 year time frame to develop a municipal water right in the Gallatin Valley. And part of the reason for that is we are in a closed water rights basin. So you cannot get a new water right. That means that you have to use other options, water rights mitigation options, for example, that really take quite a bit of time to develop. And if you look at a lot of the properties that come into the city, that are annexed into the city, a lot of them will come with an agricultural water right associated with it. But that agricultural water right is tied to that piece of ground specifically, the place of use. And it's also tied basically to the irrigation system, so 3 to 4 months out of the year. So that's not something that we can then immediately translate into a municipal water right that we use year round and across the entire city as a place of use. That water rights change process is a long process, and there's really no guarantee at the end of that there would be any municipal right that could be created. So that would be a very difficult tool for a developer to use to bring water rights to the table. And then, again, I won't go back through item 3 here in a lot of detail, but, a developer can no longer use offsite water efficiency and water conservation measures to offset their demand and get a credit for that. So that gives you a sense of how a developer might be able to meet the water adequacy code of the city going forward. So a few water facts. Bozeman gets its water supply essentially from 3 sources. We get about 40% of our water supply from the Bozeman Creek watershed, about 40% from Highlight Creek, and about 20% out of the Bridgers and the Lyman Spring. So a few facts, and I want to highlight this. Bozeman really is not at risk of running out of water. When a developer proposes new housing, we have to ensure there is adequate water for that development. So we have to put our engineer's stamp on that to say, we're reserving the water that we have in our system for this. We're not going to over allocate our supply. So that's one element. Another thing that I want to say here too is that in a normal water year, if you just look at our current water supply portfolio and our water rights, and if you look at our demands in 2024, we summed up all of our demands through that year. That means we would have used about 43% of our water supply in a normal water year. If you look at a significant drought year, because our water supplies are prone to drought conditions. So if we had a 1 in 50 year drought, how much of that 2024 demand would that chew up of our water supply? It would chew up about 60% of our water supply in that heavy drought condition. Bozeman proactively manages its water usage through our conservation program. So one thing that I'll highlight is since 2013, when we started developing our water conservation program, we've essentially created the equivalent of 14,000 population in water savings since that time. So it tells you we're doing a pretty good job and we're using our water supply sustainably. And then, lastly here, we continue to develop and implement new water conservation measures and water supplies according to our long-term water supply plan, our integrated water resources plan. And that's a critical thing to understand. When we talk about those 43 and 60% numbers, those aren't set in stone. That's the snapshot today. But we continue to develop our water conservation program. We continue to add supply. So we're continually changing that picture and advancing our supply picture. To give you a sense of how effective our water conservation program has been compared to other places throughout the US and Montana. So right now, Bozeman is using about 114 gallons per person per day. And that's an average annual use. So that includes, landscaping, irrigation in the summer months as well. Others in Montana, we looked at a number of other cities and averaged their use. Generally, that's about 163 gallons per person per day. If you look at other communities in the arid West that also have water conservation programs, Boulder, Colorado is at about 133. Denver's at 140, Bend's at 157. If you look at the water use numbers a little differently and look at it on a household per day water use, Bozeman's at 188 gallons per household per day. National average is about 254, and the arid Western states about 314. So again, I really want to stress, that you're seeing in the numbers here, we are using our water supply very sustainably, and we're very proud of that. So I'll hand this over to David Fine to talk about the housing side.
Thanks, Sean. So just thinking a little bit about housing, as ever since I've been working in affordable housing, the most common question I get from folks is, well, affordable for who? And it turns out the Department of Housing and Urban Development has a kind of standardized way of talking about this that housing professionals use. And every year, HUD releases what's called the area median income, or alternatively, the median family income. And they publish that annually for each area, and it's based on household size. So for a 4-person household in Bozeman, the area median income is about 100.
Available. Record your message at the tone when you are finished. And
so then they say, what's affordable is 1/3 of your pre-tax income going towards your housing cost. So when we think about and then take that to a monthly housing payment on a for sale unit, or a monthly rent cost on a for rent unit. So when you think about area median income and an AMI level, that's how you think about affordability. So typically, we will set an affordability target. So in this case, the Water Adequacy for Residential Development Initiative is setting an affordability target at 60% of the area median income for rentals and 120% of the area median income for sale housing. To reach those levels, every past affordable housing project has required subsidies. So, under these levels that are set by ward, 0 new units have been developed over the past 5 years without subsidy. Whether that's a direct cash subsidy or whether that's a regulatory subsidy that also has an impact on the bottom line. So, for example, the city created an affordable housing ordinance back in 2022, updated again in 2024, and that ordinance provided density bonuses. So essentially decreased the land cost per dwelling in order to subsidize affordable housing. So what does cause housing to be unaffordable? Well, it's largely 4 factors that are really beyond the city of Bozeman's control. And those are the cost of land, labor, materials, and lending. Those are the input costs of housing that really drive its cost. You'll notice that water is not currently listed as one of the things that is driving housing costs. And I think that's important to note because while it's certainly essential for modern housing to have water delivered to it, it's not the access to water or not access to water is not a significant contributor that's driving the cost of housing. So giving people access to the city's water supply through the cash in lieu of water rights program, or not giving them access to the program isn't something that drives the cost, but it does affect your ability to actually provide housing. So, as we talked about earlier, we've been working with public, private, nonprofit partners to work on housing affordability. We've continued to refine our policies. Like I said, we've updated our affordable housing ordinance twice in the past 4 years to really dial it in. And as we designed that affordable housing ordinance, and I think this is really important, we asked for housing economists to study how much housing could be provided with the kinds of density bonuses that we're providing with the code, right? And so they looked at a base case scenario that's looking at a cost of building budget, a housing pro forma for a project that didn't use it, and they looked at a project that did use it, and they said, even with using the affordable housing ordinance, For rental housing, they could only get 5% of the units to be affordable at 60% AMI or 8% at 80% AMI without some other kind of subsidy. And beyond that, like the project became financially infeasible. As it pertains to Ward, we wanted to look at how the Water Adequacy for Residential Development Initiative affected two different housing types. So we asked a different housing economics firm, Economic and Planning Systems, to take a look at two different scenarios for and budgets, if you will, development budgets, if you will, for building housing. So they looked at a hypothetical 30-unit single-family home development and a 90-unit, three-story, basically three-story walk-up apartment complex. They put in current costs of construction by talking to a number of builders and developers in the area to get those cost inputs, and then looked at standard land costs per unit across there, and then standard profit margins. So if you look at the single-family home, there's a target of 10% profit for that project, a relatively modest profit compared to other ways that you could invest money. And then they looked at a scenario, again, on the single family home, in which it was required to have 33% of those homes sold at 120% of the area median income. And what you can see right away is that the cost to construct and the land cost, exceeds what you can actually sell those homes for in profit. And so you lose across all 30 homes in development, $25,000 per home by subsidizing those 33% homes, which would cause the entire development to lose $747,000. On the multifamily side, you can see something interesting. So multifamily is different. People are leasing these rates, and so developers are looking at their net operating income each year. So the threshold they look for using profitability is yield on cost. In this case, a really standard industry yield on cost, just across the entire housing development industry for multifamily, is a 6.5% yield on cost. For those of you who don't think about housing development, housing finance a lot, that's a smaller number, I think, than a lot of people think of in terms of a profit threshold for developers, but that's really what most developers are targeting across different kinds of projects. One of the interesting things that's happening right now is because land costs have gotten so high in Bozeman and development costs have gotten so high, right now, a market rate project in that baseline scenario, a market rate project does not meet the 6.5% yield on cost threshold. It comes in at about a 5% yield on cost threshold. And so what that means is, right now, because of those costs are so high, also because of a significant amount of supply in the market, we're seeing a big slowdown in developers looking at new market rate projects. And that's just part of what's happening in our market right now. They can't make a normal return on their projects. So if a market rate project doesn't work, a project with 33% affordability project really doesn't work. Across the board, you'd lose. There's a value gap of $97,000 per unit. So that's on every unit, including the market rate units, in order to hit that affordability threshold. So what is Ward's impact on housing? Well, since Ward doesn't really affect the costs of housing, and in many cases, based on EPS's analysis, you can see that it costs more per dwelling to build the housing than you can get in revenue. Adding a 33% affordability requirement, and again, this is a housing professional, also on the basis of what we're hearing from our third-party consultants, it's going to make market rate projects not work. And so market rate projects are a really important part of the housing picture. The reason that we have vacancy in our market, the reason there is downward pressure on rents, the reason there are rent concessions in these housing prices is because we have more supply in the market, because there is vacancy in the market. And so there really isn't enough subsidy out there to get affordability, just affordable housing with subsidy, as well as keep the rest of the market from inflating without that market housing. So there's two ways for developers to do it. One is we find new sources of subsidy that don't currently exist, or developers could try to make the non-affordable units subsidize the affordable ones, but there's a limit to that. And the reason for that is that our housing market doesn't stop at the city limits. So at some point, if the homes become expensive enough, people can choose to live somewhere other than Bozeman that does not have this requirement. And our building industry also does not stop at the edge of town. So people can build those homes somewhere other than Bozeman. But this is not a costless solution, because Bozeman is still a major trade center. It's still a major employment center. Montana State University is here. The hospitals are here. The schools are here, you know, and even many of the people who come to work in Bozeman every day are already commuting into the city. So we'll see likely increased traffic and increased use of our transportation system, but without being able to collect the property tax revenue in order to build and maintain that system. So what can we do together? Well, I mean, housing affordability is really a national problem. These inputs are in many ways driven by national trends and national cost structures. But we can keep working together like we have over the past 3 years, working with nonprofits, state, local, federal government, and continue to implement our community housing action plan and our integrated water resources plan to make sure that we're doing everything that is within our power to address our housing and our water. So there's an election coming up.
Just so you know, you got about 30 seconds here.
That's great. I'm going to close strong. There is an election coming up. If you want to go to the next slide, Sean. It's an all-mail ballot election. Ballots are going to be mailed on October 17th. Those ballots can be returned by mail or dropped off at an official drop-off location. And if you don't know anything about your voter registration, you can find out at voterportal.montana.gov and check the current status of voter registration. Next slide. I'll leave you with 3 things to think about as you think about this initiative. First, it's unlikely this initiative will result in more affordable housing due to the high cost of building housing and that 33% requirement. At this time, Bozeman's not at risk of running out of water. We proactively plan our water supply and emphasize water conservation to ensure current and future residents have access to water. And finally, I just say there's really no silver bullet to make housing more affordable. And this is another regulatory barrier, and that likely creates barriers to comprehensive solutions. With that, I'll be happy to take your questions at the end.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you. Really appreciate it. I am going to ask a couple quick clarifying questions. So again, we're not having discussions just to make sure we fully understand what you do. Sean, you mentioned the current statistics on water conservation as well as gallons per person and gallons per household. Sort of thinking about the world as it is right now versus with the WARD initiative passed, is there any differences in water supply in use or conservation?
Yeah, so the way that I think about that is water really doesn't stop at the city boundaries, right? It crosses all of the agency boundaries. And so if you put the housing in Bozeman and we're using that water efficiently, and you say, okay, then you drive development outside of Bozeman where water is used less efficiently, then you're actually increasing the water demand on the system because you still have that same housing demand, right? That housing demand's got to go into the county. It's got to go into the surrounding communities if it can't happen in Bozeman. and our numbers show that we're more efficient than those areas. So if you think at this about this from a system standpoint, that development, that more dense development happening within the city limits actually creates a more efficient water use for housing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other, again, clarifying questions? The goal here is only to understand kind of what's been presented. Okay, I'm not seeing any at this point. Thank you, all of you. Really appreciate it. And next up, we really appreciate having our word folks on, and it looks like Dan and Suka, you're on the same slide. Is this right? Really, thank you for coming today. We're very appreciative of having you. Do you mind introducing yourselves? And again, same as the last presenters, we have you have the ability to share, and it's at the bottom if you have slides. You're way ahead of me. So Dan and Nansuka, you want to introduce yourselves, and we're looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Sure. I'm Natsuki Nakamura, and I'm one of the co-authors of the ballot initiative and a member of the ward working group.
I'm Dan Carty. I'm one of the co-authors of the ballot initiative and a member of the ward working group.
Okay.
Thank you, and I'll have you take it from here.
Okay. So the title of our presentation today is Bozeman Water Adequacy Municipal Ballot Initiative, also known as WARD. Okay, who are we? We are a local, grassroots, intergenerational group of folks. We are a combination of renters and homeowners. We are not a special interest group, as is alleged by the city, but rather we are long-term residents who care deeply about the city. We come from a variety of different socioeconomic backgrounds. We are bakers, biologists, beekeepers, teachers, students, and others. For example, I'm a retired fisheries biologist, and we're working to make Bozeman an affordable place to live where you work. Okay, let's talk about the ballot initiative process. Under the Montana Constitution, citizen-led ballot initiatives are guaranteed to us as state residents under at least 3 sections of the Montana Constitution. Article 2, Section 1, Article 3, Section 4, and Article 5, Section 1. Ballot initiatives are designed to go around elected representative bodies. So in essence, the city of Bozeman, Gallatin County, and the state of Montana really cannot affect this initiative other than by their individual votes at the ballot box. We are going directly to Bozeman voters as an exercise in direct democracy. So the ballot initiative process. This final version of the ballot initiative was approved for signature collecting by the city of Bozeman and by Gallatin County in March 2025. By law, we are given 90 days to collect signatures from 15% of Bozeman's registered voters. That number is 5,356. At the end of the 90 days, which was June 23rd, we collected 5,800 verified signatures, which qualified the initiative for the ballot. As the city mentioned in their presentation, ballots will be mailed out October 17th. They need to be returned by 8 p.m. on November 4th. Sample ballots are available. You can download one today from your My Voter page. Okay, on the ballot, this is what you will see, the statement of purpose. Again, by law, the statement of purpose is limited to 100 words. We submitted a slightly longer version to the city. The city attorney modified it and cut it back to 100 words. So this statement of purpose has been approved by the city of Bozeman and Gallatin County. So to talk about specific items in the ballot initiative itself. It does require residential developments of 3 or more units to include 33% affordable units for rent or for sale at 60% AMI or 120% AMI, 60% for rent, 120% for sale. It requires the affordable units to be the same quality and size as those rented or sold at market rate. This is different than the city's current affordable housing ordinance, which allows affordable units to be built smaller and of a less quality than market rate or luxury units. Also, our initiative requires that affordable units be distributed evenly and within a development and within all buildings in a development to qualified Bozeman residents by random lottery. This seems to be a very fair way of allocating affordable units throughout any kind of development. Also, our units are proposed to be deed restricted for 99 years or as long as Montana law allows. Essentially, it would be close to in perpetuity. And I also want to speak specifically to the deletions that we propose under the initiative. The city has made a big deal out of the initiatives seeking to repeal residential development to satisfy water adequacy requirements by implementing offsite water efficiency or conservation measures. This is a deliberate proposed deletion on our part, as is another proposed deletion, which is to prevent development in the city to come to some other agreement by which they could loophole out of cash in lieu of water rights. So our proposed deletions are deliberately designed to funnel developments into the cash in lieu of water rights program.
Okay. So just some graphs that are mostly pulled from the city of Bozeman. So as recent as October 2023, this was given multiple times as part of the water conservation presentations, was showing projections of our water demand as a city, surpassing our reliable supply as a city sometime between 2027 and 2023, depending on climate conditions. So as the city mentioned, we have done a lot of water conservation measures. Those often water restrictions on lawns, et cetera, and new landscaping requirements for new developments. So a lot of these measures have extended that timeline of when we might exceed a reliable supply. But it's important to note that we do have a finite supply, regardless of whether it's what year we'll run out. There is a risk of running out due to it being a finite supply. This is a newer graph that the city has released in February of 2025, showing that our water usage is closer now to 49% in 2024, including the development that was approved. But in drought conditions, that would be closer to 68%. And a drought year, we have to remember that the city cannot preempt more senior water rights in doing when thinking about a reliable water supply. So as the city grows, it should take into account that water rights in the Gallatin Valley are currently oversubscribed, and impacts on the Gallatin River can already be seen in unprecedented low water levels in the river. So even though we have done a lot of water conservation efforts, water conservation should provide for current and future residents, but also should think about climate resiliency. As we've heard, we are drought prone, and those climate could become more unpredictable. And we should also think about water conservation with the lens of wider ecological benefits and health. So we heard a bit about what is cash and lieu of water rights. So the city has said that a majority of developments, somewhere between 98 and 99% of new developments, are currently using this cash and lieu of water rights mechanism. It is already part of our city code that we are just modifying. That cash and lieu that we get from cash and lieu of water rights can be used for a variety of things, such as buying future water rights as they become available. But as we are in a closed basement, it is often hard to get useful municipal water rights. Other things that could be used for is to explore alternative sources such as groundwater or large-scale water transfers such as pipelines from Canyon Ferry or other sources. But it's important to note that cash in lieu of water rights is not enough cash to do all of these things. Currently, I think the cash in lieu cost is priced at the same that the city has previously bought water rights 1-to-1. So it can pay to buy future water rights to pay back the one that we gave away to a new development or allocated to a new development. But say if we have to build a pipeline, that would be a multi-billion-dollar project that would not be within the budget of the cash in lieu pot. And then just to do a little more numbers here, the city presentation covered some of this, but this is the 60% AMI level that's being targeted for affordable rents. So that's one person making just under 50,000. So that's more than a starting teacher salary. And these would be the what would be defined as affordable rents. So a studio, 1 bedroom, a 2-bedroom, about 1,600 for rent at an affordable rate. For sale, we're targeting 120% AMI. So that's one person making about 100,000, or maybe a family with 1 child having a shared income about 128,000. Maybe that's a firefighter plus a teacher. And that for sale, an affordable house would be just under $500,000. These are the same income targets that the city has identified as high needs. So their incentives have also targeted 60% AMI for rent, as some of their trying to incentivize rentals, affordable rentals. And they're looking at a parcel of land in Fowler that's also trying to target that 120% AMI for sale. So this is well recognized as needed levels for sale and for rent for affordability. This is from the City of Bozeman's recent population and housing forecast released this month, showing that multifamily vacancy rates in Gallatin County have steadily increased, with close to 20% now. And we see that we've had a lot of multifamily units being delivered in the past few years. So what this graph tells me is that there's not so much a shortage of housing, but a lack of affordability in housing. So if we have a 20% vacancy rate, then there's a mismatch between what is being built and what people can afford to actually live in. As the city also mentioned, that a lot of the multifamily units have used the LIHTC federal credits as subsidies. It's a very common subsidy for multifamily units. So the city has about 1,000 more of these LIHTC projects or units using these LIHTC credits in the pipeline. So those would not be affected by WARD because LIHTC projects are typically 40 to 100% affordable, so way above the threshold being required by WARD. So if assuming that those projects continue and we have a 20% vacancy rate, we aren't in a need of multifamily luxury units. We just need to have affordable units that people can afford to rent. Lastly, a few things about the slides that the city shared as well. The city's analysis has also showed that even under market rate status quo conditions, that some projects would require subsidies. So again, unrelated to WARD, there is an issue with the market conditions now that is causing some projects to be unfeasible. So the question of, is this going to push development out to the county is really a question of, does WARD make feasible projects unfeasible, or is there other reason projects are becoming unfeasible at this time?
Okay, to do a brief summary of what WARD really is. So broadly, WARD is a ballot initiative that will create a simple linkage program. Linkage programs are fairly common around the United States. They are tools that local governments can and do use to require development to provide some community benefit. So for Bozeman, the WARD initiative links a development's need for municipal water supply to Bozeman's need for affordable housing. For the next 10 years, every year for the next 10 years, the city of Bozeman probably needs between 50% and 60% of all residential dwelling units coming online to be affordable at 60% AMI for rent or 120% AMI for sale, just to catch up with the affordable housing deficit within the city. So will Ward eliminate cash in lieu of water rates? The answer is absolutely not. The initiative is designed to funnel almost all developers through the cash in lieu of water rights program. Will Ward push development to the county? That is a debatable claim by the city to a dubious claim by the city. The county does not have the infrastructure to handle the higher density developments that are planned for Bozeman. And in addition to that, the county has a responsibility to provide affordable housing of its own. So the county and nearby municipalities could develop linkage programs of their own to require new developments to provide affordable units as well. That is one way we can all work together to provide affordable housing in this area of Gallatin County. Bozeman has plenty of water. No matter how much water Bozeman has, it will be finite no matter how many pipelines are built. Currently, the conversation about water includes 3 pipelines, the one from Canyon Ferry, a 2-way pipeline between the city of Bozeman and the city of Belgrade, which was brought up at a joint Belgrade-Bozeman Commission meeting this summer. And the 3rd pipeline that has been brought up, at least in public comment, to the Technical Advisory Committee, to the IWRP, is a trans-basin transfer of water from the Yellowstone River to the city of Bozeman. I think folks who delve into the peer-reviewed literature on large intra or interbasin transfers of water will find out very quickly how deleterious these are, not only ecologically, but also economically and socially. So will Ward be a moratorium on development? Absolutely not. The demand for building in Bozeman will remain high because it's a desirable place to live, and because cash in lieu of water rights will not be eliminated, developers will continue to build in Bozeman. I'd like to close with a recent quote by a former Bozeman mayor who stated that the city of Bozeman does not have water conservation for the natural environment. Instead, the city has water conservation as a set aside for future high density development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your presentation. I am going to ask for clarifying questions. I did want to ask you guys one before just to make sure I understood. You were talking about that this proposal would eliminate sort of that off-site water conservation, and I believe you said you believe it would be used as a loophole. So it sounded like bringing rights in or going through the cash in lieu process would be the two. Do you have any analysis on if those proportions of how annexations would come into the city would occur if the ballot initiative passed?
As I think Chanko's mentioned, that even annexations that come with some ag rights, they don't often have municipal use. So I'm guessing most would pay cash in lieu of water rates. But just to clarify, the language keeps the on-site water efficiency measures in, so they can do water efficiency measures on the new proposal. They just can't do water efficiency or fix things off on a different site, on a different proposal.
Great, thank you so much. Any other just clarifying questions from this group, just to make sure you understood what Dan and Natsuki presented? Okay, I'm not seeing clarifying questions at this time. Dan Carty, Natsuki Nakamura, thank you so much. We appreciate this presentation. And again, once we get through all of it, we'll look forward to our discussions. The next phase is we're moving towards kind of 3 topic interests experts. And our first one is with the Regional Housing Coalition.
They just absolutely sit there and
Nathan
Hang
Steen,
on
I've
one
got
second.
somebody who needs to mute.
There you go.
Nathan, are you able
Yes,
to?
I'm here. Hey, everyone. Nathan Stein. Thanks, Karen. The executive director of Headwaters Community Housing Trust, here representing my organization, not the Regional Housing Coalition. Just want to clarify there.
I'm so sorry, Nathan. I got that wrong. I'll get
No
that
worries.
fixed.
No worries. Thanks, Karen. We are a member of the Gallatin Valley Regional Housing Coalition, but just want to be clear who I'm representing today. So who are we? I'm going to screen share a couple of things here. If I can find them, which I can't. So
share is down.
or rather, I can't find the thing on my screen. So I'll go ahead.
That problem. Yes,
So
we all have that.
Who am I? Who is Headwaters Community Housing Trust? We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We're a community land trust organization. So that is a model of shared equity home ownership where we produce or acquire a unit of housing. We raise funds to subsidize it and sell it at a below market price. And then we split up the ownership so that our organization maintains ownership of the land that the home sits on and the home buyer purchases the home itself. The function there is that the home buyer signs a ground lease with our organization where they agree to a cap on the appreciation of their home over time. So in the case of Bridgerview, which I'll talk a little bit about, our community land trust, the appreciation cap is 2.5% compounded annually. So home buyers, homeowners in the community land trust, they're able to build equity, build some wealth over time, but not so much that it's not affordable to the next household when it comes time for them to sell. So we see this as a really powerful tool to decommodify and stabilize the home ownership market. And we really gear our projects towards folks in the missing middle in Bozeman. So we define that as households between 80 and 120% of their median income. We've got one project built and on the books. If folks have been to the M or Bridger Bowl or out to Story Mill Park, you'll have seen the Bridgerview neighborhood right next to Story Mill over on the northeast end of Bozeman. Bridgerview is a 62 home mixed income community, LEED Platinum certified, the first in the Rocky Mountain West, either market rate or below market. We're really proud of that. 33 of those units are below market. All the units are identical. Dan, I think you mentioned before the desire to have below market units equivalent to market rate units. That's a philosophy we share in our projects, and it's on display in Bridgerview. So we've got 33 of those below market units. And what I really wanted to bring to the conversation today was just one organization's perspective as a nonprofit developer of below market housing. So let me find my slide real quick and see if I'm able to do this. There we go. Oh, here's the one I was looking for before. This is Bridgerview, if you guys are curious. Just an opportunity for me to show off some nice professional pics that we just had done. All right. Anyway, where's the one I'm looking for? So it's very expensive to build housing in Bozeman. And really that's the fundamental challenge in trying to create new below market housing. So couple of high level things. The Bridgerview was for 62 homes. It was about a $43 million project. We didn't have that money up front. So we went to a bank for a construction loan. So I think David earlier talked about the key inputs of housing production. They're generally land, labor, materials, and lending. You can make it 4 L's by calling materials lumber, which is nice. So for a $43 million project, with half of those homes subsidized at below market rates affordable to missing middle households, the total revenue for the project was around $28 million. So we spent $43 million. We only brought in 28 in sales, which meant we had to get 15 million an outside subsidy to help the project balance out. So I've got that on a per unit level in this slide here. So for 1 unit of housing at Bridgerview, our total development cost was 700 grand. I'm using round numbers here. Most of that is the cost of construction, labor, paying folks for their hard work in building these homes. Planning and design, that's generally your soft costs, architects, project managers, construction managers. Land, the land value here is relatively low because it was purchased at auction out of a bankruptcy. And then the key point here is that, you know, there isn't developer profit involved here. This is a break-even project. You're not able to get a project built if it's going to lose money, because that means you can't pay back your loan, you can't pay your contractors. You need to, at the very least, pay for the development of the unit, which raises a challenge when you want to sell the home for $350,000, which is affordable to your target population. What you're left with is a difference in about $350,000 in the case of Bridgerview. We call that the capital gap. And my organization and other entities in the housing world, but I'll try to speak for myself. We really see that as the fundamental challenge in trying to create new below market housing in Bozeman. It costs more to build housing than it does to sell it at an affordable price. And if you want to make a project happen, you need to find funding to make it work. There are some existing funding sources. The low-income housing tax credit program has been referenced a couple of times on this call. I'll note again that for our project, it was about $15 million in private philanthropy. It was private philanthropy because there aren't existing and reliable sources of subsidy for the kind of work that we're trying to do. But to express that as a percentage, that meant that about 36% of our project budget had to be subsidy that goes in to price these units below market. For low-income housing tax credit projects, that number is generally closer to 50 or 60%. And that's borne out in other local projects, as far as I'm aware. So I say all this to just try and read folks into the costs that we're up against as we try to expand a pipeline of below market housing. The capital gap has to be bridged for a nonprofit developer in order to make a project work. For market rate developers, they need to do more than break even. They need to hit a profit margin in order for a project to happen. And so I think that the main point that I wanted to make here is that if we really want to accelerate the pace of below market housing production, it's not really enough from where I'm standing to mandate it from developers or require it through a program like Ward here. If there isn't a source of subsidy that you can use to bridge the gap and make it happen. I think there are opportunities to create those sources. I'll float a couple here. I think Bozeman has a huge untapped resource in terms of tourism and tourism revenues. If we can find a way to allocate some of the existing tourist taxes, like the bed tax and the rental car tax, to local housing production, so that we can take some of that revenue from tourists and use it to address some of the impacts of being a tourism community. I think that's something that we can definitely consider. There are other communities that have bonded for housing. So I think we have to have a conversation in this community about creating, whether through a levy or a bond, some new source of funding that we can use to grow our pipeline of below market projects. And then I think there are other interesting opportunities with other linkages from public investment and infrastructure. If there were a measure to expand a water sewer district in Gallatin Gateway or Four Corners, I think you could calculate some sort of affordability requirement that could be required of developers that are using infrastructure that the public has built. They've done that in Big Sky to really powerful effect. So yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what David provided in terms of kind of the high level economic data, but I'll look forward to answering any questions and engaging in the discussion at the end. Thanks.
Great. Thank you again, Nathan. Any clarifying questions before we move to our next topic expert? Okay, thank you, Nathan Stein. And again, it's Headwaters Community Housing Trust. Sorry, I misspoke with which hat
Thank
you
you.
had on today.
I appreciate that.
Thanks. Next up, Ashley Gilbert, Long Range Planner for the county. Because of course, one of the things we're trying to understand is where potential impacts could be distributed. Ashley?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. First, I just want to reiterate what my colleagues at the City of Bozeman said. I am not here as a local government employee to advocate either way on ward. I'm simply here to educate, answer any questions, and be a resource. So with that, I do want to provide a little bit more background and context around the status quo. So the county zoning district that's around the city, which is nicknamed the donut, the city's the hole in the middle, is mostly zoned low density with 1 unit per 20 acres. There are certainly some exceptions to that, but for the most part, the biggest land area designation within the donut is that low density zoning. And except for the Ray Water and Sewer District, which is in the kind of Gooch Hill, Huffine Lane area, the only option for water and sewer services in the donut is well and septic systems. Those are on an individual scale. As this group knows, you can't build much density on well and septic systems. So most developers looking to do substantial projects propose annexation into the city of Bozeman. And this low density zoning designation in the donut creates that incentive to annex. The city of Bozeman at that point in time decides if they can extend services to the new development, asks important questions. So they have the water to accommodate the new development, what's the zoning going to be, etc. So the annexation system really helps to ensure that more dense development is on City of Bozeman water and sewer. And that's great. There's one entity managing the system, managing conservation and new connections, and they do a really good job at that, as we saw from their presentation earlier. So if ward passes and developers can't make that 33% affordability requirement pencil or come to the city with water rights, they may look to the county to develop and to meet the needs of our growing population. Which in some cases, like in the donut, that would require zoning amendments to build more densely. But actually, in the case of the 75% of private land in the county is unzoned, any density at all could be proposed. There are some water and sewer districts in the county, but we're hearing from folks like Ray Water and Sewer District and the Four Corners Water and Sewer District that they are mostly at or near capacity, which leaves well and septic systems the more likely source for water and sewer. And again, those are usually managed on an individual basis. Of course, well and septic systems can be very appropriate in isolated rural areas. But if we see a lot of development on well and septic, this could be very problematic for water resources. And that, again, there's no central entity to manage that water use and sewage treatment like there is with a municipality or a water and sewer district. And we at the county don't have any tools available right now to really manage or account for cumulative impacts of those systems. Additionally, we hear time and time again in our public outreach that our community really prioritizes open space and wildlife habitat. We've also heard from a lot of agricultural producers that it's really difficult to maintain their operations when large historically agricultural tracts are fragmented with residential development. We've heard some really sad stories from folks about how tough that can be as more development happens in the county. More development in the county is also likely to be sprawl, and that's another thing we often hear from the community that they don't want to see. Sprawl is also broadly recognized by planning and infrastructure experts as an inefficient use of taxpayer dollars. Additionally, the county does not have the resources to serve large unplanned development when it comes to things like road maintenance, snow plowing, emergency response, etc. And of course, we don't own our own water and sewer infrastructure, so cannot extend those services. All of our plans and policies, including the future land use map, recognize that municipal annexation is the gold standard for new development. The city has the services and infrastructure to accommodate new construction, whereas the county is very limited. All of our plans are built with the assumption that annexing into the city of Bozeman is, fairly doable under the right conditions. So if this option is made more difficult, it could cause a lot of planning challenges for the county in terms how do we accommodate potentially a huge increase in development interest, and how do we serve that development? And lastly, I just want to say that the county is looking very closely at housing affordability and what role we can play in that. but it has to be done and is being done very thoughtfully and considering where increased development can go and be served adequately while preserving water and considering sensitive lands. So that's all. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Any clarifying questions for Ashley before we go to our last topic expert? Okay, I'm seeing none. Thank you so much, Ashley. I'm sure we have questions for all of you once we go through our last speaker, Carrie Strassheim, Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. We're excited to have you talk us through the water rights aspect of thinking through this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'll state, like the other government entities stated, I am not advocating a side. I'm a neutral state public servant in this. So we don't have super neat water supply budgets yet. I think we'll learn more about that next month. So what I thought I'd do is start with sharing some observations. So I'll start with the city. They do have a very complex portfolio of water rights, water reservations, and shares in ditch companies and state water project water. The city has done a lot of work on water supply planning over the years with many varied stakeholders. I do also see that not all water rights offered up in annexation and development to Bozeman are considered equal, and that's true across the board, right? Water rights are not equal. Location, priority, etc., all affect how you would value, look at a water's usability, I believe was a term Sean used. And so, so like private irrigation rights, while very usable in other aspects, the city doesn't consider them usable based on the requirement of going through our change process, whereas share water is considered, I think, very usable. And city folks, correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. So I thought I'd, segue with the observation that note that even the city sometimes will avoid certain permitting processes. So when I look at what developers kind of trend towards, it is, the easier path, right? We all route plan, paved highways, interstates look good, but is there a toll? Maybe we don't go on the toll roads. That's how I look at permits. And so we do see that developers tend to do their cost risk analyses, look at their profit margins, and pick paths that they perceive as more certain and less expensive. Time and costs are always large components, right? So one thing we look at when we're working with our stakeholders, how can we provide more certainty to our permitting processes? And how can we incentivize best practices? Just throw that out as a general question. That's something we're always working on, right? These policy discussions are always being tweaked. They should all be kind of living and we're moving forward. So going to what both Sean and Itsuki brought up, we are in a closed basin. There's no new water available. You have to look at old water rights to mitigate new water use. And this, as the city has done, you conserve to keep your pot kind of more open for additional use. So we have, and then that kind of brings us to our current issue with permit exceptions. What do we do with those? We have a small use exception that does not have to go through a permitting process, also known as the exempt well. That is still an issue. We had some solutions we presented at the last legislative session. One passed, one did not. The one that did not would have created controlled groundwater areas in these areas of high growth to try to get at a better water management. We know an area of concern, I think Suki mentioned this, the West Gallatin. We know it's over allocated and any connected groundwater is affecting those flows at some level. So we do have those challenges that we face. So that's what I thought I'd say in my 5 minutes, and I'm open to any questions.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Any clarifying questions for Carrie? Okay, I'm going to open this up